Welcome to Fight News Now Extra. It's John Pollock with all of your headlines in the MMA world. John Ramdeen will be stopping by to discuss all of today's news, including two lightweights angling for a big fight, the UFC not giving up on a particular female star to join the promotion, and the California Kid is booked for Brazil. The UFC will be holding a fight night card on Saturday, March 21st in Rio de Janeiro with a tentative main event between bantamweights Uriah Faber and Rafael Assuncao, according to a report from Globo. The two have fought in the past, with Faber defeating Assuncao by submission back in January of 2010 in the WEC. With Dominic Cruz out of action indefinitely and Renan Barão receiving the next title fight, Faber and Assuncao would be the next contenders for a title fight. ESPN reported that Chris "Cyborg" Justino is in negotiations with the UFC for that elusive UFC debut and potential fight with Ronda Rousey, which has been talked about for years. Lorenzo Fertitta confirmed talks were ongoing to ESPN, but said they would need to be confident she could make 135 pounds. Cyborg's representative also confirmed the talks and stated the UFC had been very professional during the ongoing talks. And lightweights Khabib Nurmagomedov and Donald Cerrone are attempting to book their own fight after going back and forth on Twitter with the challenge made and Cerrone accepting it. Both would like to fight on the Memorial Day card in May, which is tentatively scheduled to be headlined by Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor for the featherweight title. Cerrone stated this past weekend he needed some time off after 2 fights in 15 days, and May appears to be his target to return. And we look ahead to the action this Saturday night. It all kicks off on Fight Pass from Sweden at 4 p.m. Eastern. Then at 5 p.m. we'll be sending you over to TSN4, 6 fights coming at you from the Tele2 Arena. And then the main card kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern, headlined by Alexander Gustafsson meeting Anthony Johnson in your light heavyweight 5-round main event. All right, Mr. Ramdeen, some fights coming our way. It looks like bantamweights Uriah Faber and Rafael Assuncao are going to be locked in to fight March 21st. This was interesting because the reason they went with Renan Barão in Montreal was they didn't think Assuncao would be ready to take that fight. And as it turns out, Assuncao will be fighting a month before that title fight, as it turns out.
Very, very strange. However, I like the matchup because you've seen the improvements Rafael Assuncao has made over the last number of years. Looking very good. As a matter of fact, he holds a victory over TJ Dillashaw. So you can actually sell that to the public. I know there's been talks that if it comes down to the right circumstances, Uriah Faber would face TJ Dillashaw, but it doesn't really seem like that fight will
actually... If he wins, though, like, what are your other options at this point? You're really putting yourself into a corner by your next logical contenders fighting.
And that's the problem, because I don't think you really need to see this fight again. Yes, from a hardcore fan standpoint, yeah, it makes sense because Uriah Faber's legit, Assuncao is legit, have these guys square off. What happens if Uriah Faber wins, which is most likely the case coming out of that fight in Brazil? You kind of throw it away with Uriah Faber, and you throw it away because Assuncao lost. So, and I think you could have had better matchups, more intriguing matchups.
That's when Uncle Frank and Lorenzo open up the briefcase and show them the money down to Team Alpha Male and say, hey guys, we're going to book Sacramento.
And they're fine. Sure.
I think when push comes to shove, they would do that fight.
They would do it.
They have not been like Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier refusing. They've said, you know, it's not a fight we want, but we'll see where we go.
Like you said.
They've left the door open for it.
They've left the door open as long as the dollars make sense.
And I think the UFC will make it worth their while. Now, we move over to the lightweight division, some interesting movements within that division. Some news we didn't get to in the headlines there, but Bobby Green is out of that April 4th fight with Jorge Masvidal, and now Benson Henderson is in to take on Masvidal.
Love it.
And then the other half of Henderson's fight last weekend, Donald Cerrone, he's looking to get onto that Memorial Day card, as I'm sure every fighter is, with Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor penciled in. That's going to be a massive show. Cerrone wants Nurmagomedov, and Nurmagomedov wants Cerrone.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And word is that the winner of that fight will eventually get a crack at the lightweight title, which would have to. But there's so many scenarios. I mean, Donald Cerrone has been obviously active in this part of the year. Will probably have more than one fight before the end of 2015. Who knows? He could probably have 3 more fights before the end of 2015.
If Dana White promises the winner a title fight, you take that to the bank.
Yeah, you take it to the bank. And then you have to remember the outcome of Anthony Pettis and Dos Anjos. So you never know. Anthony Pettis, prone to injury in the past. Right, it's a good time for 155 pounds. There's lots of work. Actually, it's a good time in general for fighters in the UFC because, you know, there's lots of fights, lots of fight cards, and if you can keep yourself healthy, you can find yourself in a quick turnaround. But on top of that, you win a couple of fights, you could be fighting for a title like Donald Cerrone.
I know you don't love to dive into the numbers and all of that stuff, but you look at this pay-per-view with Aldo and McGregor, especially coming off how well that Fox Sports 1 show did on Sunday night. I mean, over 3 million people tuning in for the McGregor-Seaver fight. This is after midnight on a Sunday night. Even the prelims doing pretty strong. Just under 1 million viewers going against the Colts and Patriots game. Putting Conor McGregor on pay-per-view with Jose Aldo. I mean, can this top 750 or so, which Cormier and Jones were rumored to be at?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I could be wrong. Yes, people, it's an interesting fight, but for a lot of the hardcore fans, or the casual fans, I don't know if they're behind Jose Aldo. This is a guy that doesn't come out on camera and talk a lot because, you know.
Neither did Dennis Seaver.
That's right. Well, that's true.
Different dynamic when you're paying.
Yes,
but
that's
I
true.
think that we've shown Conor McGregor against nobody, no disrespect to Dennis Seaver, but he didn't bring any of those eyeballs on Sunday night.
Fair enough.
Jose Aldo, I mean, this is a way more interesting fight. It is your incumbent champion. I think that, you know, if they really hit the marketing strong on this, I think this one could threaten.
I mean, you could be right, especially when it comes down to having Donald Cerrone also on the card and all the background players, all the supporting cast, so to speak. You load the card, you could be right.
Let's also chat about Chris Cyborg Justino. The talks that just don't seem to ever disappear. It's just when we think it's a write-off, back in negotiations with the UFC. Do you foresee this deal eventually coming to fruition for the UFC?
Yes, but what you have to look at right now, like, for example, the whole Ronda Rousey situation. Ronda Rousey is the star. I don't think anybody gave a rat's ass that she was fighting Sarah McMahon or Alexis Davis or any of the other fighters that she fought. It is the Ronda Rousey show, and I think the UFC has to take a look at Cyborg and say, you know what? We can do the same thing at 145 pounds for Cyborg. Have her come in, decimate girls. People will want to see. We do not need to see Ronda Rousey versus Cyborg. However, sign me up.
Ramdean putting his foot down on that one. We have more Fight News Now Extra, so don't go anywhere.